Hi guys, it's Scores. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm talking about a new book by Elsie Chapman called Starter. This is a sequel to her book Caster, which came out last year and is actually going to be getting a movie adaptation soon, so that's super exciting. This is my sort of creative contribution to the Caffeine Book Tours book tour for Starter, and I'm just really excited to kind of talk about this book and also show you some of my creative process. So I've been really into making like stickers and designing stickers and stuff recently, so I decided I wanted to make some stickers in response to and kind of referencing some stuff from the Starter book. So hopefully you will sort of get the references once you're able to pick up this book and enjoy sort of the process of watching me design these stickers. Pretty much I just am currently sort of sketching out all of my concepts and stuff in Procreate, and later on I go into Illustrator to make the stickers in kind of a vector form. So Starter is like basically sort of a magic, kind of futuristic, slightly apocalyptic Fight Club type book. It's almost like a little bit hard to describe, but the setting itself feels very natural. This book as a sequel itself follows on very clearly from Caster, the first book, so it is a little bit difficult to fully talk about the Starter without spoiling Caster if you haven't already read it, but I would highly recommend you pick it up. The audiobook, which I listen to, is great. And I really think that Starter as a sequel really does not lose out on pretty much any of the things that you really enjoy about Caster as the original book. So after Aza goes through like a whole bunch of trauma in the first book, and like she's sort of really gets put through the ringer, she's now put in this situation where she's kind of under the control of the gangs who are sort of the main both the main antagonists of the her sort of life, but also these gangs really control sort of everywhere she lives, and her life, her parents' lives, everyone that she knows is highly affected by sort of gang activity. So for Aza sort of now being established as this person who has quite a bit of agency and power in the first book, she's now kind of dealing with the fact that she loses a lot of that agency and power from the end of the first book. One thing that I just think is so great about the world building in the Caster series in general is that all of the magic has a really strong impact and effect on both like you as a person but also the world around you. So like whenever you cast magic, it has like a physical effect where it causes you pain, but it also has this environmental effect where it is causes environmental destruction, degradation, sort of global warming type scenarios, where like animals die or there's big earthquakes, tsunamis, things like of this nature. So the larger the magic that you do, the more that you put yourself but also the world around you in danger. And I think a lot of fantasy books kind of like do this. They say like, oh, there's a cost to casting magic, there's a cost to using magic, and you have to pay the cost. But I've never really read a book that really sort of like hammers home how deeply the cost is like on yourself as a person, but also on the world around you, as Starter did. Caster of course, being the first book, has a lot of these elements, but Spellstarter really follows on from that and says, like, okay, you know, now Aza's casting, you know, she's very good at magic. She's casting these very sort of large and complex spells, and she has to deal with these really massive consequences for her actions that you never really, I think, in my experience, see people having to actually contend with their actions in such sort of a visibly painful way, especially as they become established as powerful casters and powerful, you know, sort of users of magic in other fantasy series. I don't think that, you know, part of their power is their ability to mitigate the harmful effects. But Aza absolutely cannot do that, and I think Elsie Chapman is really super interesting in this story, in the fact that she definitely, you know, does not kind of pull any punches on Aza's story and on Aza's development, and pretty much throughout the entire book, you know, it's one of those things in the fantasy series where you're always kind of expecting, you know, the Deus Ex Machina, or, you know, like the hero to kind of overcome their limitations, and it really doesn't happen at any point in the book, in a really good way, that you just, like, you know, it's set out that, oh, this action has consequences, and people pay those prices very dearly. I also really enjoyed the just development of Aza as a character, in terms of having to contend with the fact that she's like a person in reality. I think often you have, you know, sort of like these young protagonists who tend not to, I guess, like, not so much like that they don't care, but that they just don't kind of have these like big impacts and kind of have to deal with their emotional toll of their actions, of, you know, being the chosen one, and or having this sort of call to adventure in a way that Aza does, which I think is very much realistic, because she's not fighting for anything that is sort of world important. There's no kind of higher purpose for what she's doing, and she's very aware of that, but also everyone else in her life is very aware of that, and the interpersonal conflict that comes from that, I think, is like very realistic, very well done. There were a couple of things that I wasn't such a fan of. I found the romance element a little bit rushed and not hugely compelling. There were some elements of, you know, like her clear interest in this character in the first book, but it was mainly due to sort of his looks, and not really much about him as a person. And even when in Spellstarter you do kind of start to get to know him better as a person, you don't really sort of see necessarily what makes him attracted to Aza, or what attracts Aza to him, other than he's good looking and he's like a nice guy. I didn't really I didn't super buy their relationship, but also it was also like depicted very much as early days of their relationship, so I don't think it like totally impacts your reading or of the book or whatever. I also felt like the ending was a bit rushed, and part of this is that the pace of the book is very fast. The first book takes place over a week, and then this book takes place over like, I think like I want to say basically a week as well, like 4 or 5 days. It's, you know, it just like zooms through all of this action very, very quickly, and I think that most of the time it handles its pacing really, really well. Like, it keeps you very engaged, but also, you know, gives you all of the information that you need to know to kind of like understand the conflicts and understand the people. I just found that the conflicts at the end, you know, like there's a ton of action. It's like leading up to the climax, and then the climax happens and it's like something massive, and then there wasn't much kind of winding down from the climax. It just kind of ends very suddenly. So I felt that was kind of a little bit lacking for me, just because I wanted a little bit more resolution in terms of like, you know, where does Aza go from here? You know, like, how does she kind of deal with the aftermath of all of this stuff? And then also, like, you know, quite a large kind of event happened, but you don't really get to see how, like, the rest of the world also deals with the aftermath of all of these things. But on the whole, like, I still think that the climax and the events that happen in the climax made a lot of sense in the context of the book and in terms of what happened. There was a number of mysteries that kind of got paid off in a really interesting way. I also really enjoyed all of the sort of complexities of the different characters and how they got to play with each other. Even kind of at the very end of the book, they were still kind of dealing with this interpersonal conflict, and they didn't necessarily trust each other, or they didn't necessarily sort of know what was going on, and that was like a big reality that had a huge effect on the end of the book, but didn't necessarily it wasn't something that kind of like dragged along, or that was just forgotten and they all kind of joined together to like save the whole world. Like, that was not the end of the book, and I felt that also was very true and realistic to the characters and to the story. Another part of the Spellstarter caster universe, which is extremely important, is it's very you know, it's highly inspired by the author Elsie Chapman's experience as a Chinese American, and it is really steeped in Chinese culture in a really interesting way. So Aza's last name is Wu, and I don't believe in the books they actually said which character her last name is. So when I made the sticker for Wu Teas, which is like the cafe that her parents own, I kind of just picked the most common last name character for Wu. So I hope that's the correct one and she doesn't use a different one. But yeah, so there's like a lot of the elements of the characters in terms of their relationship with their parents, but also the kind of motifs that are interesting to them, the fact that they speak Cantonese. I think the fact that Aza's sort of responsibility and her relationship with her sister being as complex as it is, again, a lot of these things I felt were just very true to this Asian American experience, or just like in my experience, kind of just generally this Asian experience. That was just very interesting to read, especially in a fantasy setting. These kinds of the sense of obligation and the way that Aza sort of experiences herself and her family, and the obligations and responsibilities that she feels to them, felt very fresh in this kind of style of book, and was something that I was sort of like constantly very interested in. I also just think that generally the description of the world that she lives in is very like beautiful and interesting, and different to kind of like what you normally kind of get to read about in these fantasy series, even kind of like modern fantasy, in which it was definitely very much kind of based on our world in terms of the fact that like they had phones and they had trains and stuff like that, but also the fantasy elements were so kind of integrated and normal, that it never felt that sort of normal magic was considered as something abnormal to anyone in the scene. Which I think sometimes you can have in fantasy books, is like othering of the abnormal, the othering of like normal magic within this world. So I just really felt that Spellstarter did exactly what I wanted it to do after I finished Caster. It in many ways, I think, was actually even stronger in terms of her interpersonal relationship with her parents and with the people around her, and how Aza kind of like dealt with the world and dealt with her own battles and her own struggles, now that she kind of got closure from the death of her sister. I also really enjoyed the general world building and sort of learning more about the history and the structure of the world, which you don't get a ton of in Caster, but Spellstarter, I think, really takes its time in elaborating and teaching you about these different historical aspects and ways in which the magic has affected and grown and changed with the world that Aza now lives in, and all of these effects, how they still kind of, all of the history still affects people and changes people and influences people today, which I found, like super interesting to listen to, both as like a book and also like in terms of learning more about the world. I think that the world building in Spellstarter is like so realistic, in terms of just like the way that everything feels very natural and logical in terms of how these things would progress. So ultimately, I definitely give this book a 4 stars, 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I just love the world building and everything around it. I think you definitely should pick it up if you like fantasy. Definitely if you are a fan of books like The Poppy War, where they are fantasy but have this sort of like very much focus on like interpersonal conflict and real world issues, you should check out Spellstarter. I also hope you sort of enjoyed watching my process of designing these stickers. I didn't really talk much about them in this video, but if you would like me to make more videos like this and having a look at some of my design process, please let me know. So the kind of stickers that I did today were, one is based on the tea sector, which is where Aza lives, and her parents own a tea shop, and their tea shop is Wu Teas, which are known as like sort of like the finest in the land, and they've got like this historical reputation that's great, but they're kind of like a, diminished from history. And there is the Cast Responsibly sticker, which was influenced by the fact that a 5-pointed star becomes, sorry, not a 5-pointed, a 15-pointed star becomes something very important to Aza's casting, and it has a big kind of effect on her through the book, so that's why I made sure to make the star in the Cast Responsibly sticker 15 points, because Aza definitely doesn't cast responsibly, and I think that's a large part of her issues throughout the story. And finally, I just wanted to have a sticker with her name. I thought, oh, maybe this is like a badge or a pin that people would wear when they go to see her in the ring when they fight, because, like they're betting on her, they like her, they want her to win, and they're trying to support her and shout her name and stuff like that. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy this video and this time lapse. And if you are interested in sort of reading this book, I will have all of the links to where you can find it down below, as well as the rest of the tour links for the Caffeine Book Tours tour. And I also want to say, if you want to connect with me on my socials, they will also be down below. I will try and post these pictures or the sticker designs either on Twitter or on my Instagram, or probably both if I can remember. And I hope you have a great day, and like this video and share it if you're interested in Spellstarter or more of my content. Bye!